Well, after dying on the cross and then rising again, Jesus says to his followers, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." So you might have heard that there's a virus sweeping across the world, but actually I don't think anything Jesus has said has changed. Right? Actually, Jesus still has all authority, and actually he's still building a kingdom, and we as a church, a body of people gathered around him, are still actually doing his work. We've still got a job to do to make disciples, and we're still called to live under Jesus. And our church mission statement, we had a look at it this week in the light of everything that's happened. We said, do we need to change this at all? No, actually nothing needs to change. Before we were saying we want everyone to be living for Jesus and bringing people to him. That's our mission statement. And actually nothing's changed, but the format's going to change. Everything's going to look a bit different from this point on. Now you've got to say these are interesting times. Everyone will remember where you were and what you were doing in 2020 when you look back on this in the future. But what are we doing? We want to be people who keep on knowing and trusting that Jesus is actually in control and that we'll never be separated from the love of God. And we want to then respond as a people who keep on loving each other and keep on reaching out to our community for Jesus, even though it looks different. So with that in mind, this is going to be our last big gathering. Like I say big, already we're half the size we normally are because a lot of people have stayed home, and I've actually said to a lot of people, look, stay home because you're a little bit sick or because you're in a little bit of danger of catching a sickness. And so we're already, this is not our biggest gathering, but this is going to be our last gathering like this. We're making this change by choice. We're not actually required, so legally we can still have 60 people meet in this room. But we think even though we're not required, we think this is probably the best way to love people, is to break into lots of smaller, what we're going to call home churches. And those home churches might just be you, your family, live streaming the content from next week. Or it might be a little group of up to, say, 10 people max if you've got a large room. If you've got a 40 square metre room, you've got a shed or something, you can have up to 10 people in there. So from next week, from the 29th, you'll be able to go onto our website, southern.org.au, and there's a button. You get your phones out in a minute, actually, because we're going to need your phones. So grab your phones out now. Start finding that website, southern.org.au. I think. Can we go to the next? Oh no, here it is. There we go. Southern.org.au. That's a website you're going to need to find in a second. It's all changing. Most of the links don't quite fully work yet. But from next week and from midweek, start checking up on that, seeing what you find. You should find a button that says, live stream. And there's nothing going yet. At the moment, we're just recording. We'll upload this to the internet later for those who can't make it today. But from next week, we're going to be live streaming our content. It'll be coming out of someone's lounge room, and it'll be coming into your lounge room, okay? If you want to do this by yourself, you can call it Pajama Church. All right, church in your pajamas from next week. But I reckon a bunch of us would do well just to gather in little groups which drastically slows the spread of the virus, but still actually has some community. And when we do that, we'll practice all the best practices of hand washing, sanitising, not sharing cups, not handshaking, and trying to keep a bit of distance, which is why church feels ridiculous at the moment, because we're trying to keep the rules of 1.5 metres between people. So that's going to be from next week. And while we're doing this, what I want you to do as a church, I want you to commit to a time of praying. Okay? I want you to commit to a time of praying that this new way of doing church for the next few months or however long, in it we find new ways to love each other. In it we find new ways to care for each other and to reach out to our community and show the security that we have in Jesus. Even though we're playing it safe and trying to flatten the curve and trying to make sure that we don't catch or spread the virus too much, we actually have a great security in our Jesus. We have a security of life with him and Father forever. We want to, so that's what I'm asking you to do. Pray in these next couple of months. Commit to prayer that we're going to find new ways to do all those things in slightly different formats that don't involve shaking hands. A couple of things are going to completely stop. The playgroup is going to completely stop for the next couple of months, but Jess is hard at work finding new ways to reach out to the community and reach out to young families in that way. Our small groups, they'll do something that they decide, so each small group will work out what they want to do. They might go down to smaller groups. They might still meet. They'll work that out. So if you're in a small group, talk to your small group leader. But one thing that's going to help us do all of this really well is think through what are the new needs. Like what's changing? At the moment, we're probably not going to need anyone to join a serving team to set up the chairs in the community centre. Right, for the next couple of months, anyone who's on that part of the roster, you get a free ride. Like nobody has to come set up chairs after this morning. We still need to pack them away today. Well, we need to think through what are the new situations, what are the new teams we're going to form, what are the new ways to serve. And one of the ways to do that is, grab your phones out now, go to this page that says southern.org.au and click on the button that says Keep Connected. Okay, in order to actually keep looking after each other, today we've really got to push, we need some contact details. So normally we try not to push for contact details too much. But today, if we don't have your email or your phone or some way to contact you after this, then we're totally dependent on you coming and finding one of the groups through the website. It'd be great if we could send you messages and emails from time to time. So there's a chance for you now. I'm going to give you a few minutes while I waffle up here, just to fill in some of your details on your phone. Even if you think, oh, they've already got my details, just fill them in anyway, just to be sure we've got the right ones. And then down the bottom, there's a few more things you can click. You can click whether or not you want to be part of the contact directory. Like, do you want to have access to other people's phone numbers? And there's a bit of a process. If you click that button, we'll get in touch with you to make sure that you're okay with your phone number being shown and all that. And we'll show you how you can change what you put on the contact directory. There's a little couple of buttons for you to choose. Do you want to join a home church? So, and you can choose, yeah, I want to join a home church. Yeah, I want to join a home church. In fact, I'm willing to host a couple of people, maybe 2 people, maybe 8 people. I'm happy to have a few people over to my place. You can click a button there. Or you can say, no, I totally want to isolate myself. I'd like to not be a part of a home church. I'm just going to stream the services by myself. Just give us some indication. That'll really help us work things out. If you do want to host, they won't be big numbers. Maximum 10, I think we'll go for. And you're going to have 4 square metres per person. We'll be in touch to talk about that. And then during the week, we'll give some information on where there's some spots. If you want to have some community but not a huge one, we'll let you know where you can go. And there's also a little space down the bottom, so you can say how many people you think you can host. If you leave any of these blank, that's fine. The more you give us now, the better. And there's a space for any other comments that you think could be helpful. So look, I don't think I can travel more than about 3 kilometres from my home. Tell us that. If you've got an idea for a new ministry, tell us that. But expect change, but expect things to stay the same. We're still loving each other, looking after each other, growing in Jesus. We're still reaching out to our community, but things will look different. There won't be a setting up chairs team, but there may well be an emergency toilet roll delivery service. And you might need to get on board with that. If you've got a car and you're healthy, you might be one of the people that comes and collects a roll of toilet paper and quickly gets it out to someone who, in our church or in our community, who's in need. That's probably not exactly that, but it could be something like that. We don't know what it'll be yet. Keep in touch and we'll find out. Does anyone have any questions? Anything they're really needing to know? Ask now. It might be helpful to others. It might be helpful to people who are going to watch this later on the internet.
The live stream is also available at any time?
Yeah, so the live stream, it'll go online ideally at 10 a.m. every single Sunday, but then it should be available from then on. So you should do that. But I really encourage people to watch it at 10 a.m. because we're also going to do a few other things, like details on this are following, where we'll actually get hopefully some webcam chats. So you'll actually be able to, at a brief moment in the service, dial in and see, oh, those are all the other people in my church who are meeting in suburbs, but I'm not actually in the room with them, but I'm in church with them, in one sense. Okay, it's going to be weird, but we're going to do the best we can to stay connected. We're going to try to keep people connected even if they are totally self-isolated. The people who say, I cannot meet with anyone because I'm in chemo or something, or I'm actually fighting a particular disease myself, I can't afford another one. Even if people are totally isolating, we want to connect them. So if we can do it at 10 a.m. and we can set up the things that allow us to connect to each other using phones and that'd be great. Anyone else have questions? No, that's great. So that's where we're going in the future. Can I get Catherine now to take the kids out? I think there's only one kid here, so why not? Catherine, this is Kids Church. Kids Church is strong. And I'm going to hand over to Nathan again.
Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. "I have spoken openly to the world," Jesus replied. "I always taught in synagogues or at the temple where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said." When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. "Is this the way you answer the high priest?" he demanded. "If I said something wrong," Jesus replied, "testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Meanwhile, Simon Peter, who was still standing there warming himself. So they asked him, "You aren't one of his disciples too, are you?" He denied it, saying, "I am not." One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him. "Didn't I see you with him in the garden?" Again, Peter denied it, and at that moment a rooster began to crow. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanliness, they did not enter the palace because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked. "Or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of the truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. With this, he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him, but it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews?" They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising.
So a really surprising thing took me by surprise this week as I was working on John 18 a bit. It's actually not about the coronavirus, which I found really surprising because basically everything else I read all week has been about the coronavirus. That's all I've read all week, except for in the Bible I find John 18. Turns out it's not actually about the coronavirus. I think it took me by such a surprise, I almost tried to make it about the coronavirus at one point. I found this verse where Jesus says, "My kingdom is not of this world, but now my kingdom is from another place." And I thought, oh, that's it. The sermon's written already. This is going to be a passage of encouragement. I'm going to say to everybody, look, whatever happens in this world, Jesus' kingdom, the kingdom we're a part of, is actually not of this world, it's somewhere else. You know? And I'll bring in places like Colossians 3, which talks about how Christians, we live here, but actually we're in Christ and we're seated at the right hand of God. You know, we're not here at all, actually, and we can't be taken. We can't be shaken. Nothing can hurt us. We're somewhere else, aren't we? And that's true. It's just not what this passage is saying at all. But there's a great security in knowing that we are totally safe in Christ. No matter what happens with the virus and the economic downturn that might happen afterwards, we're actually safe. That's all true. It's just not what this passage is saying. So here's the plan. Why don't we just, for the next 30 minutes, just forget about the coronavirus just for a bit. Okay, we're going to put that aside and say, not try to make this passage about it. But having said that, I did find, once I've worked on this passage, there's a way of applying it that I think is relevant now that would not have been relevant 3 months ago. So the world has changed, and so the way we end up applying it is going to be just slightly different. But to start with, let's actually imagine that we're not living in 2020. Let's imagine that we're living in 120. I imagine like you're living 1900 years ago. You're living in the year 120, say about 90 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus. Okay, you've got to imagine that. So you're not living now. There's no virus. Or there is something else, but you're living in 120, and you live on, say, a surprisingly multicultural street. Imagine this situation, which I think this passage talks directly into. Imagine you live on a multicultural street. You're a Christian, okay? You've accepted Jesus as your King, your Lord, your Saviour. But on your left lives a Jew, and on your right lives a Roman citizen. Just imagine that, okay? You live 120. I don't know what you're wearing, but on your left is a Jew, on your right is a Roman citizen. And you go out to the letterbox or the local watering hole and you hang out with these guys because you can still come close to people. And you get talking to them about what God you worship. And the Jew says, I worship the God of Abraham and Moses who rescued us from Egypt with a mighty arm. That's my God, says the Jew. And the Roman says, you've just got one God, have you? What a shame. I worship Jupiter and Neptune and Apollo and Mars and Saturn and Bacchus. I definitely worship Bacchus. Right, the God of wine, and the Christian says, I worship Jesus. He's my God. He's my King. And the Roman says, and this is the situation I think this passage really talks into. The Roman says, I've heard about him. I've heard about that Jesus guy from almost 100 years ago. Yeah, we Romans crucified him. And so it must be that he was some sort of rebel leader. He tried to lead some sort of band of followers, like the Judas Maccabean revolt of a couple of hundred years earlier. Maybe Jesus must have led some sort of rebellion, and that's why Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, put it down. Because that's what we do, we Romans. We put down rebellions. Like, you don't take on Rome unless you are powerful. And some backwater Galilean with a few followers was just not powerful enough to take on. That's why Jesus died. Is that your God? What a joke. And then the Jew next to you turns to him and says, no, that's not how Jesus died. No, you got the story all wrong, Mr. Roman. The Jew cuts in and says, yeah, sure, the Romans crucified him, but what actually happened before that was us Jews, we found that he was a sinner. We found that he was guilty. We found that he tried to say that he was the Messiah, he tried to claim to be the Son of God, and that's a terrible blasphemy. That's really dishonouring to God. So we Jews, we had a legitimate trial, and we brought him in, and we had testimonies, and we worked out that he was a sinner and he deserved to die. And we could have stoned him on the spot, but we thought, no, actually it's better to get the Romans to do a proper execution where we can lift him up high and shame him so everyone sees that's what happens if you try to dishonour God. Now, so sure, the Romans did actually technically execute Jesus, but it was us Jews who worked out that he was a sinner, and we were actually the reason for that. And the Jew turns to you, the Christian, and says, is that your God? What a joke. Like, your God, your King, is a sinner who we had executed by the Romans 100 years ago. What a joke. But then you, an early Christian, this is where I think you get this passage out, because, of course you own your own copy of John in that time. And it has all these numbers as well. They weren't there till later, but let's just pretend they were. This is where you get out your copy of John and you say, actually guys, I think you might both be dealing with a bit of fake news here. See, I've got this thing called John, the book of John. It's an eyewitness account, and it actually records a few parts of both the Jewish and the Roman trials. Not everything, but it records a few bits of the Jewish and the Roman trials that led up to Jesus' execution. And the thing that these eyewitness accounts show us is that he wasn't a sinner who got caught and executed. He wasn't a rebel who got caught by the Romans and got executed. No, he was in total control. And because he wasn't a sinner who got executed or a rebel who got executed, because he was in total control, it is totally legit for him to be my king. It's totally legit. This guy who was in control of his own death and later rose again, it's totally legit to say he's my king. I think that's what this passage primarily speaks into. So let's imagine, let's keep your Jewish neighbour on your left and your Roman neighbour on your right. Come with me as we read through this passage. Pick it up at verse 19. So there's a situation that first Jesus gets arrested in the dark, and we did that last week, and then he gets brought to the high priest, except it's a bit confusing because which high priest are we talking about? He gets brought, the previous passage says he gets brought to Annas, who's the father-in-law of the high priest. But now it says, hey, the high priest is talking to him, and then at the end it says they take him off to Caiaphas, who's the high priest. So it's just dodgy from the start, right? Who's the high priest? If you're going to arrest a guy, then surely you'd wait for the actual judge, the actual high priest. No, they take him to the father-in-law first. Maybe he was available. Maybe there's a bit of a struggle for power. I'm not quite sure why, but it's just dodged from the start. It just seems dodged to arrest someone in the dark and then immediately hold a trial before any lawyers in town have got a chance to wake up and hear what's going on. It just seems sus from the start. And they don't seem to have a charge against him. They just want to pick apart what he's been teaching about himself. So he's been claiming in previous passages, he's the king, he's the son of God, which sure, that would be blasphemy if he was not those things. But if he is those things, then it's not blasphemy. So the bottom line, Jesus didn't die on the cross because the Jews discovered he was a blasphemer. He died on the cross because the Jewish leaders didn't believe him about who he was. There's no new charge they're bringing, they're just trying to clarify what he's already said about him. The issue is they don't believe him. Or what about the next bit? Your Jewish friend next to you says, yeah, okay, I admit that maybe that seems a bit dodgy, but what about the next bit? Let's look at this passage that you've got in front of you. Look at verse 25. Look at Peter, says the Jew. Isn't he one of the big names in your church? Isn't he one of the famous guys? And you say, yeah, Peter is actually quite a big name in the early church. And your Jewish friend says, well, if Jesus is such a great king, right? If Jesus is so awesome as you say, how come Peter doesn't want to admit that he even knows him? How come when Peter is asked, hey, do you know Jesus? He's like, no, I don't know that guy. Like, if Jesus is such a great king, why would Peter be denying him? And you as the Christian say, well, yeah, actually Peter was scared of the Jews who wanted to kill Jesus. And straight up, Peter failed to follow his king. He let him down. He betrayed him. And later on, Jesus has to make a big point of forgiving Peter. There's a big thing. 3 times, Peter has to say that he loves Jesus. And Jesus forgives Peter. And doesn't just forgive him, actually enlists him to be one of the great generals in his army for the kingdom that he's building. And then, back in 120 AD, you turn to your Roman friend and say, like, just as a bit of an example, like, what would you Romans do if someone betrayed the emperor? Like, so Peter betrayed his king, and then he was forgiven and became one of the generals in the kingdom. Like, what would happen if you, a Roman soldier, were to betray the emperor, and your Roman friend says, dude, keep your voice down. Don't even talk about that sort of thing. Yeah, things don't end well for traitors in the Roman Empire. And so you, the Christians, say, yeah, well, my king forgives. My king forgave Peter betrayal. And the promise of my king is that anyone who comes to him asking for forgiveness gets it. Not just being forgiven, but actually the opportunity to work in his army and even reach the rank of general like Peter. That's why I love my king. But enough about Peter. We're looking at why Jesus was condemned to die on a cross. So let's jump to verse 28. We're into the Roman trial now. So the Jews bring Jesus to the Roman governor, and John has a bit of a go at them in this passage, because they want to stay clean so they can enjoy the Passover. They're quite happy to kill an innocent guy, but they're going to stay out of the Roman building so they can stay ceremonially clean. So Pilate has to come out to them. Verse 29 says Pilate saying, what's the charge? Like, why do you want this guy executed? What has he done wrong? And so now your Roman friend says, oh yeah, this is good. This is what Roman justice is about. See, we're not just going to execute a guy, what is the charge? We're going to find some truth here. And the Jews give the charge. No, they completely fudge it. They say, oh, verse 30, if he were not a criminal, they reply, we would not have handed him over to you. Pilate says, that's not an answer. Don't waste my time. He says, you guys, if you're going to be like, you take him yourselves. If you think he's guilty, you take him, you execute him. You judge him by your own laws. And the Jews say, but we have no right to execute anyone. Now that was technically true. They don't have the right, but in reality they got away with stonings fairly frequently. Okay? They wanted just to kill him, they could have just stoned him. But they want a special execution for Jesus. They want the kind of execution that only the Romans can do. Kind of tie him up on the tree and shame him, let him suffocate and bleed out, so that everyone can see that's what happens when you stand against our God. This is how you put down a new movement. But the thing is, this was Jesus' plan too. All the way through the book, Jesus has been talking about his death as the time that he will be lifted up, is the phrase. He's going to be lifted up. His death is going to be a lifting up kind of death. Chapter 3 is a lifting up kind of death. Everyone when he's lifted up, everyone can look at him and believe in him and be saved. Later on, it's a lift. When he's lifted up, that's when he's going to draw people to himself. So his death has to be a lifted up kind of death. So verse 32, John tells us, this all took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. He's not just planning to die, he's planning to die in this particular lifted up kind of way. It was really important that the Jews didn't stone him. It was important to Jesus that he got to an execution on the cross. So you say, to your Jew and your Roman friend, your granddads were playing parts according to a script that Jesus wrote. Yes, the Romans executed him. Yes, the Jews handed him over because Jesus intended to die on a cross. He needed to be lifted up for his mission. Now your Roman friend at this point looks at you weirdly and says, I think you're insane. Like, nobody has ever wanted to be crucified. It's the worst way to die. It's the most shameful way to die. But by definition, you can't want that. It's insane. But you say, yeah, but that's what he did for me. That's how much my king loves me. That he took that for me so that I don't have a similar or a worse shame and a worse punishment before God one day. That's what my king took for me. The Roman looks at you and says, I still think you're weird, but anyway, it would never have happened like that. We Romans would never crucify an innocent man. He must have done something wrong. He must have said something he did against Rome. There must have been something he did. No one would choose that, surely. He must have done something. So you turn back to the text. Verse 33. We look at what's the crime that Jesus has committed against the empire to get him crucified. Verse 33. Pilate then went back inside the palace. Summoned Jesus and asked him, are you the king of the Jews? And I wonder if he was saying, are you the king of the Jews? Like, this king we're talking about, is it really you? And your Roman friend says, yeah, there you go. We're talking about him being a king. This is a matter of setting up a rebellion. This is why he got crucified. If he was a king gathering an army to take on Rome, that's worthy of a crucifixion. But back in the story, Jesus kind of has a problem how he answers this question. Because what kind of king is Pilate talking about? So Jesus asked him, is this your own idea? Or did others talk to you about me? I need to clear this up before I tell you whether I'm a king. He's asking, Pilate, are you asking out of your Roman background, out of your Roman thinking? Are you seeing whether or not I'm kind of a rebellion kind of leading kind of king? Are you asking if I've got an army hiding in the hills? Is that what you're asking? Or are you just asking about what the Jews have said? Are you asking, am I a religious king? Am I the Jewish Messiah? Are you asking that? Which one are you asking? Are you asking, am I a threat to Rome? Are you asking, am I claiming to be the promised king, the promised Messiah, the king of the Jews, the Son of God? Which one are you asking? So he says in verse 34, tell me, is this your idea or is it? Others have talked to you about me. What am I answering here? And Pilate's like, what is with nobody answering my questions today? Am I a Jew? Pilate replied. Don't ask me. It's your own people. Your own people. They're the ones. Your chief priests. They're the ones that handed you over. You must have done something to annoy them. What is it you have done? I don't have anything against you, says Pilate. What have you done? Jesus clears it up. Okay, here's the thing. He says, I am a king. Basically, he says, I am a king, but I'm not a king leading a rebellion that you need to worry about. And now we get to that verse 36. It says, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would be fighting. They'd fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place. So here's how kingdoms work. Kingdoms come by might. Whoever has the bigger and more organised army gets to be the king. And at this point in time, Rome has got the biggest and most organised army, so they get to be, the emperor gets to be the king. And that's how kingdoms work. And even the Jewish kingdoms from years ago, it might have been a might that God gave them, but it's still a might. That's how they got the power. And Jesus is saying that's how kingdoms work in this world, but that's not where my kingdom's coming from. Because I'm not going down that route. That's not how I'm going to set up my kingdom. I'm totally a king. Yes. I expect followers. Yes. I'm going to lead them. I'm going to protect them. I'm going to save them, and they're going to obey me and they're going to love me. I'm totally a king and will always be a king, but not a king like you understand. I'm not going to set up my kingdom by a sword. In fact, last night Jesus could have said, Peter tried to get out a sword and fight for me. I said, don't be an idiot, Peter. Like, this is the plan that God is actually, the Father is giving me a cup of judgment that I'm going to drink. That's how I'm going to bring in this kingdom. I'm going to drink the cup of judgment by dying on the cross. Like, so I'm clearly not setting up some sort of rebellion. The way I'm setting up my kingdom is by dying on the cross. If you could help me out, Pilate, that's what I need right now. I need to be executed on the cross. I'm not a threat politically to you. I'm not gathering up an army. My kingdom cannot be set up by fighting. It's not a kingdom you need to worry about. I think Pilate doesn't understand much of this. He says, okay, so you are a king then, in verse 37. You are a king. And Jesus says, yes, you're on the right track. Like, the thing you have just said, you're totally right. This is the truest thing, Pilate, you have ever said. I don't think you understand it yet, but this is the truest thing you've ever said. I'm not a political king. I don't have an army you need to worry about. But Pilate, you've never said a truer thing in your life. Right now, when you said, you are a king, Jesus. In fact, Jesus keeps going, verse 37, the reason I was born and came into the world, is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. Now that doesn't mean that Jesus is saying true things. So not just saying things that are true. The sun goes up, the sun comes down. He's not saying things that are true. He's not testifying to some particular truth. He's talking about some ultimate truth. That there is some ultimate reality, some ultimate true thing that Jesus is talking about. He's testifying about it in his life. That's why he's entered the world. And everyone who's on this side of this ultimate truth listens to Jesus. So you can work out if you don't listen to Jesus, then you're not on the side of ultimate truth. So he's having a go at anyone like Pilate or the Jews who don't end up believing him. He's saying you're not on the side, if you don't believe me, you're not on the side of ultimate truth. What does he mean by that? Well, truth has been a theme through this whole book. If you get quarantined in the next couple of months, here's the thing. Just sit down with John, read the whole thing, take a highlighter, and just highlight every time Jesus talks about truth, and then you'll get the whole picture. We're not going to do that now. We're just going to pick out one verse that gives not the whole picture, but a fair bit of it. Chapter 14, verse 6, Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So here's a reality. Here's a reality that humanity is cut off from God the Father. That is a big truth. That's a fairly large truth, right? That's the big one. That humanity is cut off from God the Father. And all of humanity has ignored God, have been cut off from God. And there's one way back to God the Father. One way to save yourself from eternity of being separated from God. One way, and that's Jesus. It's through Jesus. Do you want to see God? You've got to look at Jesus. That's the truth. Here is truth. Here is God revealed. Here is the Son of God. Here is the truth of the universe. Other things can be true or false, but here is the truth. That Jesus is the Son of God. And that there is no other way to be brought back to God the Father. Pilate, not interested. No? He's only concerned about whether Jesus is a threat to Rome, and it turns out he isn't. And verse 38 he says, what is truth? With this he went out again to the Jews, gathered there and said, look, I find no basis for a charge against him. So remember, you're a second century Jew in year 1, second century Christian in the year 120, saying to your Roman neighbour, look, it's not actually a conviction here exactly, is it? It's not like Pilate thought he was a threat and killed him. So you can see here, he's gone back and said, look, I find no basis for a charge against him. And you turn to your Jewish neighbour and say, look, Jesus didn't die because he was a sinner. If you want to know what crazy sin looks like, look at what the Jewish leaders say next. Look at verse 39. And Pilate says, look, it's your custom for me to let one guy go every Passover. Every Passover I let one prisoner go how about we just release this king of the Jews because I can't find anything wrong with him and we'll just be done with this whole silliness. It's early in the morning, I just want to go have my breakfast. And what do the Jews say? They say, no, we are so committed to this guy dying, we'd rather you give us Barabbas. And Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. Here is a real rebel. Here is a real murderer, we find out elsewhere. Here's a guy who actually deserves to die. Pilate has no reason to kill Jesus, so he finds a way to settle the matter. I'll give you the murderous revolutionary or Jesus. The answer's obvious, but they say, no, we're so committed, we want Jesus to be the one that dies. How about you just let the rebel, the murderer, Barabbas back into our community? And what we get there is just a great picture of what Jesus is doing. One innocent man, Jesus goes to die, so that a guilty man goes free. And you can turn to both your Roman and your Jewish friend and say, that's why I love my Jesus. Oh, that's why I love Jesus, my King, so much. Because I'm like that Barabbas. My life, ever since I became a Christian, has been like the moment where Barabbas heard that he gets to go free because Jesus goes to the cross. My whole life, whatever has happened, the ups and downs, the sickness, the health, whatever has happened has been that moment when Barabbas hears he gets to go free. It's not fair. It's hard to believe if you didn't have all the evidence for it, but that's what happened when you became a Christian. And you just love him so much. That's what you say to your Jewish neighbour and your Roman neighbour in year 120 when they're saying it's insane to believe in Jesus because, you know, we both think we killed him for these different reasons. And you go, no, it was his own plan. It was Jesus' own plan why he went to that cross. He was totally in control. And because he was totally in control, I can trust him. And 2,000 or 1,900 years later, we can still trust him for exactly the same reason. If he wasn't in control, it'd be insane to trust Jesus. But if he was in total control, then he's in control of everything, and we can trust him. But just almost at the close here, here's the thing where I reckon there's one application of this that has changed even just in the last week. That I reckon if I was preaching this a month or 3 months ago, I probably wouldn't have said this. But to go back to that bit where Jesus has talked about himself being the truth, and Pilate just blows him off and says, what is truth? He says, there's no ultimate truth. Like, I reckon if I was preaching this last year, I'd have said, isn't that Perth? Doesn't Perth as a whole say, don't talk to me about absolutes. Don't talk to me about absolute moral truth. You can have what's true for you, as long as you don't impose it on me. Right? If I went to someone and said, look, I know some absolute truth and it affects your life, don't bring that to me. I don't mind you believing it, just don't bring it to me. Like, it's so intolerant that you would come and tell me that you've got some absolute truth and that it affects my life. I will choose what is right for me. I'll choose how to spend my time, my money. I'll choose how to use my body. I'll choose these things for myself. Right? It's so offensive to take something and try to apply it on me. I reckon that's where we were a while ago. We're very much like Pilate. What is truth? Don't give me these absolutes. And then a virus hit, and I reckon the landscape just changed. Okay, we'll find out in a few months if I'm right or not. I reckon the landscape has just changed. Because I reckon in the next few weeks and months, we're going to see people think some things are real. There are some absolutes in this world. I think globally, this big truth of life and death and possible poverty in a recession that could come, suddenly is such a huge truth, so universal that people are willing to say that there is this one real thing, and all those other things are not as important anymore. Just as an example, someone told me this a few days ago, that in Ireland, pubs were closed on St Patrick's Day last week. They're just trying to get your head around that. In Ireland, pubs were closed on St Patrick's Day. And people were okay with that. Now, if you had gone in 2019 into a pub and said, look, actually, you guys spent a lot of money, the drunkenness not all that great, why don't you just save your money, give your money to children who are in a cancer ward somewhere, and people, excuse me, no. Like, I'm in Ireland, this is St Patrick's Day, I will get drunk in the streets, and there's no way you can tell me, there's no way, and there's nothing you can do to tell me that this is not the right thing. Like, you have your opinions, keep them to yourself. I will choose what I do with my time, my money, and my body. Thank you very much. There's nothing that could stop me getting drunk, people would say, it's not me, I've never been to Ireland. Nothing could stop people getting drunk in the streets on St Patrick's Day in Ireland. But then last week, like, some reality has hit the world and has changed that. You know, people often talk about the thing we worship in Western culture is sports. Stadiums are empty. Right, something happened in the last couple of weeks that has changed the landscape. There are now absolute truths in this world. Life, death, economic downturn coming. And people are willing to take away, to give up on the things that they thought were so important, because they see now there's a more important truth. And here's my concern. It's not Jesus. Okay, there's an ultimate reality that has hit the world, and has, you know, people say it's bringing mankind together. We're finding out who the real heroes are in our world. It's not the rich celebrities, it's not the football players, it's the guys working the checkout, it's the guys bringing the trucks. Like, we're understanding things now. Humanity's coming together. It's going to be a great new day. The environment's clearing up. Everything's great. We've now got truth. We now know what it's about. It's not Jesus. That's what I'm a little bit concerned about. A little bit is the wrong word. Because one day, you know, however the world changes and everyone pulls together as humanity, these guys, they might live for many years yet, and then they die and then meet Jesus and discover, oh no, there's a bigger reality. And I've died as an enemy of the King of the universe. I think it's not just a concern for people out there, I think it's a concern for in the church as well. I hope not this church, but maybe churches around. I reckon there's people who'll say, oh look, I do go to church, yes, but while the virus is dangerous, I need to disconnect. I need to really isolate myself. I need to deal with what matters for the next 6 months or a year or so. And then when that settles down, I'll come back to church. I think that's a real danger for people in churches to say. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for keeping social distance. We don't need to spread this virus any faster. We love people, we want to save lives. But Jesus is still our King, and we're still called to serve him and live under him and to serve his body, the church. It's just going to be different. So we're going to find all different ways to do it now. But I warn you, don't say, oh, here's this ultimate reality of the virus, and I don't have time for this lesser reality that is Jesus, the King of the world. I reckon, isolate yourself by all means. If you need to keep yourself separate for a whole year, go for it. But when you do that, plan how you are going to bring the reality of Jesus into your life, into your family's life, into the lives of people outside your house who don't know Jesus. You might have to pick up a phone. It turns out our smartphones can actually be regular phones as well. You might be able to use one to call someone and say, hey, look, I was thinking about you, praying about you, wanted to check up on how you're going. Here's a Bible verse I was thinking about. It could be a danger that we say, oh, it's too scary. I couldn't possibly impose my morality on someone else at the moment. I couldn't possibly go talk to someone who's concerned about the virus about Jesus. You know, it's not the right time. But when's going to be a better time? I reckon find a way to use the opportunity. You might be able to say a sentence like this. Say, in a crisis, I realise that the virus is kind of the biggest thing in the world right now, but you know, I actually think there's something bigger. Can I have a few minutes? Can I talk with you about Jesus, who's my King? And I actually think he's even bigger than the virus. Because in a world of uncertainty, Jesus was in total control of his death. In a world of uncertainty, he was in total control of his death, and he is now in total control of things. He's still the authority, he's still the ultimate truth. I reckon he's the only place we can get security. So in the words of Revelation 1, Jesus is the guy who stands with the keys to death. That's the truth. That's the biggest reality there's ever going to be, and that's our King. Why don't you? Father God, this world is changing. Teach us how to make use of it. How to make opportunities, how to find opportunities to tell people about the ultimate reality. I thank you that you've shown us through eyewitnesses like Johnny that Jesus didn't die because his plan somehow failed. He didn't die as the Romans discovered he was guilty. He didn't die as the Jews discovered he was guilty. He died according to his own plan. And so we can have confidence that he is the King forever. Amen. Well, we're going to stand and we're going to sing in response about the grace that has come through Jesus.
Well, thank you all for coming. Let me leave you with the words of Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at the break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Well, until next time we're back here, I'll see you all online, but first at morning tea.